Hello and welcome back to the channel. I appreciate you tuning in. I hope that whatever you see here is helpful, it's informative to you, and maybe we can all learn something together. If you like it, consider giving me a thumbs up. If you're not subscribed, go ahead and subscribe. It doesn't cost you anything. It's absolutely free. It helps me out, helps me build my channel out, and it keeps you informed whenever I put something new out. And if you find something that you like, comment below. Tell me what you thought about it. If you didn't like it, you can tell me that too. I like good criticism as well. So with that being said, let's get into today's video.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to my channel. So in today's video, I'm gonna put something out there that I think I'm probably gonna get some negative comments for, and if so, I'm okay with that. I'll probably get some feedback, people that disagree with what I have to say, and that's okay. I'm completely okay with that. I'm open to hear others' thoughts and opinions on this, but I want to talk about why police officers get such a bad reputation and why they have such a bad name. And I know that they're not all the same. It's unfortunate that you have a few that affects a lot. So today I just left the Clark County Court's office in New Albany, Indiana, and I had to go with my son today for a court appearance for a speeding ticket that he got a month ago. He was pulled over by an Indiana State police officer who is one of the more senior employees because he drives a brand new Mustang, which in seeing recent news, they only gave those out to some of the senior people. So this officer pulls him over. Mind you, my son was in a company vehicle. He was pulled over and told that he was doing 89 miles an hour and a 70 mile an hour speed limit on the interstate. And so my son told the officer, he said, he was not doing that. He said, I literally had my cruise set on 74, and then when I saw you, I even lowered it down to 72, probably just out of the shock of seeing an officer. Most people do it. I do it too. I'm not going to lie. So the officer says, no, I clocked you on my radar doing 89 miles an hour. And my son comes back to him and says, well, can you please show me on your radar where you caught me? He said, because you didn't catch me because I wasn't going that fast. Then the officer proceeds to tell him that, well, I shut the radar off as soon as I pulled out to come after you and didn't have proof of it. So immediately after the officer, of course, writes my son a ticket, he calls his mom, my wife, and asks her to go back and pull his Life 360 tracking and show where it had on there, what his speed limit, what his speed was he was going at, what he was driving at. And he goes, I told the officer I wasn't doing no more than 73, 72 miles an hour. And so my wife goes back, and we have a Life 360, I think it's a gold account, whatever you pay for. So it tracks like the constant movement, like miles per hour, many other things. And so my wife goes back and she screen records my son's entire trip. And this is literally, I think he did, I don't know, 70, 80 miles. I'll have to go back. I'm going to share it with you all. But in this whole trip, you can see he's never going over 73, 74, 72. He's in that range. And so my wife screen records it, and she sends it to me, and she said, your son's story lines up exactly with what he said to the officer. The officer still wrote him a ticket saying he was doing 89 and a 70, and I don't think it's fair that he should have to pay a ticket for this, which I agree. If you did something wrong, okay, so be it, However, writing a ticket saying you did 89 to 70 and that wasn't the case is a little different. So I just left the Clark County Court's office for the traffic court with my son, and I took with me obviously the screen recording from Life 360 that showed the speed he was going, the ticket that he was given, and we get there and it's not in front of a judge. It was somebody off to the side. I don't know if it's just the one that's like, I don't know how that works legally. I don't know if it's just like a person that makes like legal decisions and is like has the authority to do so with an officer there. However, we go up there, the guy, he pulls up my son's record where he's, of course, supposed to appear. And he, of course, wants to say, okay, well, I can't defer it for you. And we're like, well, no, we're not trying to defer it. I want to make it clear that he was pulled over stating that he was doing 89 to 70, and that wasn't the case. And so, of course, he's wanting proof of that, which I get. You want to know, okay, anybody can come in there and just say that. So, I want to be clear about something. My son is 17 years old. He just turned 18. So, I think in some ways there's probably a look about, oh, well, it's just some young kid. And I don't want to, I hate to speculate, but I feel like sometimes that happens. I've been there too. I was once a young teenage driver. Nonetheless, so I pull out my Life 360 where my wife had sent me the screen recording, and of course it has the date on it. She has it to me immediately. So the dates line up, everything was there. And I pulled out the Life 360 screen recording and I began to play it for this legal person. And so he watches it and he goes, okay, so he was doing 74. I said, yeah. I said, in that range, 72, 73, 74, that's what he was doing. I said, which lines up with his story. However, he was not doing 89, which is what the ticket was written for. And so this guy comes back and he goes, what was the speed limit? I said, well, it's posted on the ticket, which I wasn't going to lie about. I have no reason to. But on the ticket, it literally says 89 to 70. So the speed limit's 70. So I told him 70 miles an hour. And he says, okay, well, you're going to get a ticket then for doing 74 and a 70. Which, to me, is just completely crazy. And I get it. And this is where I think people are going to... I'll probably get some feedback on this and some comments. I get it. The speed limit was 70. However, you have an officer who pulled someone over stating that they were doing 89 and a 70. There's a big difference. Mind you that even doing 74 and a 70, it still accounted to a ticket that was $147. That's just nuts in my opinion, Regardless, I look at it and I think, okay, well, the officer isn't there. You're just appearing in front of some random person. And I asked the guy, I said, well, what are our other options? Because, of course, it's like either... I'm giving this proposal like it's like you either get the ticket for $147 or else. And so I asked this legal guy, I said, so what are my options here? Like, does he have any other options? And he goes, well, you could go to trial with it and deal with it that way. So then it turns into you pay all these court fees and, then you're just hoping that you get by with something. Mind you that now this legal person's told me, he says, well, the judge is going to say the exact same thing because it shows on your Life 360 account he's doing 74 and a 70. He said, so the judge is even going to write it for 74. So I'm like, okay, even at this point, like I don't feel like I have a fight in the game at all. Which to me, I feel like is a joke. I feel like, I went in there in good faith, trying to be honest and be upfront, which I struggle with this because I'm like, I get it. I get that he was speeding. I get that he was doing 4 over, if you want to count it as that. But I'm going to be honest, myself and probably most people that will watch this video will say that more often than not, people are going to do 4, 5, 6, 7 miles an hour over the speed limit. It is what it is. You know what I mean? I flow with the flow of traffic. And most of the time, the speed limit does not happen to be what people flow at the rate of traffic at, And I know people are going to comment on that. People are going to feel a different way. I get it. So we walk out, and as we walk out of the room, an older gentleman, and I say he was probably in his 70s, I'd say, probably early 70s. I don't know for sure, just my thoughts. And he kind of overheard our story. Now, I never said anything about what the car was, officer drove, none of that. I want to make that clear. So the guy walks out, and he says, well, what'd they get you for? I heard you out there talking to him. And my son says, well, the cop wrote me up saying I was doing 89 to 70, and I was only doing 74. So they wrote me a ticket saying I was doing 74 and a 70 when I came in here. Which, of course, the guy agreed that it was just dumb. Like, it was so stupid they did that. I'm just going to be blunt. It was dumb. And so he asked my son, he goes, it wasn't a blue Mustang that pulled you over, was it? And my son says, yeah, it was actually. He said, well, guess what? He said, I got pulled over by the same cop, and he told him he was doing 87 and a 70. And then I asked the guy, I said, well, what'd they do about yours then? Because I'm thinking it's an older gentleman, you know, how's he going to argue the fact that he wasn't doing 87? I had Life 360, but not everybody does, you know, or whatever the case may be. And so he goes, oh, well, they threw mine out. And I said, well, how did that happen? You know, I'm like, I wish they'd have done that with my son's, because now he's got a ticket, and I hope he don't have points he's going to have on his record, you know. He's just turned 18. Like, what a way to start, you know. And so he goes, oh, no, he said it's just a matter of who you know. Which I feel like, what a corrupt system. Like, I'm just going to be flat out honest, and people can not like my comments, whatever you want to say. I'm okay with that. How corrupt is the system that's how it is? It's a matter of who you know. When it comes to something like this, that shouldn't be the case. Just because and I'm not saying anything about the guy, let me make that clear. The guy being, you know, who he was, hey, that's great. If they threw yours out, I'm happy for you. No big deal, you know. However, I think that in some ways there is a feeling of appearance here that you have someone who's obviously much older, probably in their 70s, like I said, versus a young teenage kid who just turned 18 a week ago, and that's what they get. And so I just want to say, I went back to the legal person and I said, well, what about the cop, the state police officer, who obviously incorrectly wrote a ticket that shouldn't have been written? I said, if that wouldn't have been the case, we wouldn't even be standing here having this conversation right now. And it's like, that was just brushed off, no big deal. We're going back to the fact that, you know, he was doing 74 and a 70. And I just want to say, to my point, this is why people hate cops right here. This is why. And I'm going to tell you, I appreciate cops. I appreciate what they do. You have some great police officers out there in the force. I firmly believe that. You have great police officers. You have officers that will go and spend time with children. They want to be involved in the community besides just being the one that is known as that person. But this right here is why people hate cops. So now I have an 18-year-old son who has points on his record, having to pay a $147 ticket, who just turned 18 years old, who really don't have no money, that now he's got to pay this ticket, all because an officer incorrectly wrote him a ticket saying he was doing 89 and a 70 that got brought down to a 74 and a 70, which was actually the facts. And had he have correctly handled this, he would have never even been pulled over. Going 4 miles an hour, 3, 2, whatever it was at that exact moment, which I can't say, but at that exact moment, most cops are not going to pull somebody over for doing 2, 3, 4 miles an hour over the speed limit. It's just, maybe if you're going in a school zone and it's an active school zone area, maybe so, but other than that, that's just not going to happen. So I just want to say, this is why people hate cops. You know, you hear about it. You hear about things on the news. You see all these things that are out there and why they have a bad reputation, all this. This is why. You have a senior officer. I want to go back to that. A senior state police officer who pulled him over, and that's what you get. So I'm going to share the recording, the screen recording that I have. I want you all to watch it, because this is exactly what I showed the legal person there. And just watch it and see what you see. So there you have it. Exactly what I said. I didn't lie. I could have said anything, you know, but I came in there with factual information. You know, I had it all date and time stamped. I mean, yeah, I had this whole trip out, you know. And like I said, it just goes back to the point of, this is why people hate cops. This is why. Like, you want to understand why cops have a bad reputation? This is exactly the reason why. And so, I'm going to put this out there. I'm going to put this out there because I think people should see it. I hope the Indiana State Police Office sees it. I'm going to be honest with you. I hope it makes it to Indianapolis, and I hope they see it. You have an officer that wrote some kid up, 18, who just turned 18 years old, now for doing 4 miles an hour over the speed limit when he should have never been pulled over. And so, he now has 30 days to pay a ticket. So, it is what it is, you know. I mean, when we walked out, he asked me, he goes, Dad, he goes, there's no way. I mean, and before I say this, I want to make something clear. I have a 17, just turned 18-year-old son who already sees it at his young age that when we walked out of the building, he goes, Dad, he goes, there's no way I could have won that if we would have went to trial. He said, because then they just would have said the exact same thing. And I just feel like that is disappointing. It really is. When you look at our legal judicial system, how disappointing that people do not have faith in leaders and people who are appointed to certain positions. That's sad. So, anyways, like I said, you know, these are my thoughts. These are my opinions. Some will agree, some won't agree. But just look at it. Watch what I have. Look at the facts. You know, see what you see. And I'm curious to see what other people's thoughts are. Have you ever been in a situation like this? Have you ever shared a similar experience? I'd be curious to know. And if so, like, what did you do about it? Because obviously what I did didn't work, and I didn't want to go hire an attorney and go spend a ton of money in legal fees for, you know, what I thought was going to be nothing. So anyways, thanks for watching. Appreciate it. Share this with someone else. You never know who else it might impact. Thanks.